Today, the topic of our presentation is ISA 230 Audit Documentation. Let's start with introduction to ISA 230. ISA 230 is the international standard on auditing that deals specifically with audit documentation. At its core, this standard explains why they must document it, and how that documentation should be maintained. Audit documentation represents the written evidence of the entire audit process. It shows what procedures were performed, what evidence was obtained, and how the auditor arrived at the final opinion. This standard recognizes an important principle in auditing. Audit work has little value unless it is properly documented. ISA 230 applies to all audits conducted under ISAs and form the backbone of audit quality, accountability, and transparency. It allows reviewers, regulators, and other auditors to understand the audit without needing verbal explanations from the original audit team. Purpose of ISA 230. The purpose of ISA 230 is to ensure that audit documentation is sufficient and appropriate. To support the auditor's opinion, it requires auditor to maintain records that clearly demonstrate that the audit was planned and performed in accordance with ISAs. Another key purpose is to allow an experienced auditor who has no previous involvement in engagement to understand the audit work performed. This includes understanding the nature, timing, and extent of procedure as well as conclusion reach. In simple terms, ISA 230 ensure that the audit story is fully documented from planning to conclusion so that the audit can be reviewed, relied upon, and defended if necessary. Importance of ISA 230. It is important because it directly impacts audit quality and credibility. Even if audit procedures are properly performed, failure to document them adequately can lead to conclusion that the audit was not conducted in accordance with standards. Documentation also protects auditors. In event of regulatory inspection, legal dispute, or professional reviews, audit working papers serve as a primary evidence of due care and professional judgment. Additionally, documentation supports supervision and review. Within the audit team, senior auditors and partners rely on documentation to confirm that work has been properly completed before issuing the audit report. Scope of ISA 230. ISA 230 applies to all audit of financial statement regardless of whether the entity is large or small. Complex or simple, the standard cover the preparation, assembly, and retention of audit documentation. However, ISA 230 does not prescribe a specific format or documentation method. Auditor may use paper files or electronic audit software depending on firm policy and engagement needs. Importantly, the standard does not eliminate the need for professional judgment. Instead, it provides a framework within which auditor decide how much documentation is enough based on risk and complexity. Factors affecting audit documentation. The extent and detail of audit documentation depend on several factors. One key factor is the nature and complexity of entity. More complex business require more detailed documentation. Another factor is level of audit risk. High risk areas such as estimate, revenue recognition, or going concern require more extensive documentation. The degree of professional judgment involved also affect documentation. Where judgments are significant, auditor must clearly explain how conclusions were reached. Finally, the experience of audit team and significance of audit findings influence the amount of documentation required. Practical examples: consider an audit where inventory valuation is identified as a significant risk. The auditor performs procedures such as attending inventory counts, testing valuation method, and reviewing post-year end sales. ISA 230 requires the auditor to document the risk identified, the audit procedure performed, the evidence obtained, the conclusion reached. This documentation ensures that anyone reviewing the file can clearly understand why inventory was considered reasonable and how that conclusion was supported. Applying the standard in practice. In practice, ISA 230 should be applied throughout the audit, not just at the end. Audit documentation should be prepared on a timely basis while details are still fresh. Good documentation is well organized, easy to follow, and allow the audit file to tell a clear and logical story. Frequent risk. One common risk is documenting conclusion without adequately documenting the procedures and evidence supporting them. Another risk is failing to document significant judgment or alternative treatments considered. A lack of review evidence is also a frequent issue where it is unclear whether work has been properly supervised. These weaknesses can result in audit deficiency, regulatory findings, or reputational damage. Core duties of the auditors. Auditors are responsible for preparing documentation that is complete, accurate, and sufficient. This includes recording significant matters, professional judgments, and conclusion. They must ensure that documentation supports compliance with ISAs and allow effective review. Auditors are also responsible for timely assembly and proper retention of audit file in line with firm policies and regulations. Assembly of the final audit file. After the audit report is issued, the auditor must assemble the final audit file within a reasonable time period. This involves organizing documentation and reviewing unnecessary draft. Once assembled, documentation should not be deleted. If changes are required, the auditor must document the reason for the change, who made it, and when it was made. This preserves the integrity of the audit file. Audit documentation as evidence of audit quality. Audit documentation is the primary evidence that an audit was conducted properly. It allows reviewers and regulators to assess audit quality objectively. High quality documentation reflects effective planning, execution, and professional judgment. Conversely, poor documentation often signals weakness in audit performance. Confidentiality of audit documentation. Audit documentation is a property of the auditor and must be kept confidential. Auditors are required to safeguard client information and comply with ethical standards. Disclosure is permitted only when required by law or professional duty. Clients do not automatically have the right to access audit working papers. Relationship with other ISAs. ISA 230 support the application of many other ISAs. For example, risk assessments under ISA 315 and audit response under ISA 330 must be clearly documented. It also complements ISA 300 planning and ISA 200 on overall audit objectives. Together, these standards ensure a structured and high quality audit process. Quick summary: ISA 230 focus on preparing and maintaining audit documentation. It support audit quality, compliance, and accountability. Clear documentation ensure that audit work can be understood, reviewed, and relied upon. Conclusion of the presentation. In conclusion, ISA 230 plays a critical role in ensuring that audits are transparent, reliable, and defensible. Proper application of the standards strength audit quality and professional credibility. Well prepared documentation is not just a compliance requirement, it is a key indicator of high quality audit. Thank you.